Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT. Elestrals is the channel you're on. Anyway, Moonrise is just around the corner, and if you're anything like me, you have a Brewman's soul. You can't wait to see what terrible bullshit people are going to play with these new pieces of cardboard. Now make no mistake, you're going to see a lot of that terrible bullshit weekly on 20 Spirit testing. However, today I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit more nebulously about the things that I'm excited to see people play in the coming weeks. Why? Well, because I don't really want to paint myself into a corner. Rather than talk about a deck specifically within the context of a list I brewed up in 5 minutes and then lost a best of one to Dimax with, I'd like to talk about the decks in a more archetypal sense. Other people will figure out the ratios, and by other people I'm talking about Trish, but I think it'll be interesting to explore the stuff that may compose the core of some really fantastic decks. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about the decks I'm excited about. The decks I'm excited about is probably the title of this thing. Side note, if you want to see these decks in action and the first week of brewing, make sure to tune into the Poison Nectar Monthly happening next Saturday, the 25th of January. Parts of it will be broadcast live here on YouTube. That's right, we are doing a little bit of live casting. God knows if it's going to work. Those signups are going to go live this upcoming Wednesday, so be around on the YouTube community page if you want an invite. Anyway, the first deck I want to talk about is Suppression Control. So I've referred to this deck like 100 different ways. That dense fog list that keeps popping up in my commentary on Moonrise. But to be clear, dense fog is not the only card that causes a suppression to happen in this hypothetical deck. So there's a significant amount of cards that benefit not only off of the actual factual card dense fog in Moonrise, but also there's a significant amount of cards that like the fact that things are being suppressed. These cards range in playability from okay to unbelievably powerful, should not have been printed, and may be a real capital P problem. This comes at a time when suppression is also pretty well positioned, as the sort of general good stuff list moves way closer to water than any other individual elemental pantheon. Cards like Foamy and Galaxy are quick work for individuals looking to do a little bit of suppression. A good matchup spread versus the existing decks, the ability to play impressively powerful cards, and new payoffs in Moonrise, in my estimation, are a perfect storm for this strategy. What do I think it's going to look like? Well, that's a little harder to say. Artemis is an impressively powerful divine rune that can suppress a thing. That's good on its own, but way better when you get some sort of benefit from doing so. I really like, for that reason, playing probably Elechick and maybe Fawnlet, I think is probably a little more important than playing like Plucky in that slot in order to consistently find this divine rune. Now make no mistake, Artemis is no Demeter or Zeus. It isn't going to win you the game on its own, but it will when paired with some cards that care about suppression, most notably Necrolith. I talk about this in my individual set reviews, in some discussions on Caster's Corner, and in that video that I made with A-Drive that I don't know if it's been posted, where I rate a bunch of cards that don't yet exist. But I'm really scared of Necrolith. And he's a scary guy. For those of you that are familiar with early Magic the Gathering, this is just Necrotol, and Necrotol was such a good card that we still call things that pop on ETB Necrotols. I mean, some people do. I guess there's probably new heads in the community that call it something else. Anyway, Necrolith is unbelievable. If an opponent has at least 2 suppressed cards, it can be cast like a Lith. It's a 7/3 for 2 Lunars. But importantly, you don't have to cast it like that. It can be cast just normally, ascended over a 1-drop, and then can pop a suppressed Elestral, which, if you have Artemis, is any Elestral you want at all. You're probably going to want to pair this card with a couple of cards that care specifically about Dense Fog. I'm talking about Toxiri, which adds a Dense Fog on cast. And Night Venom, which allows you to discard a Dense Fog in order to destroy 2 cards. You understand that's crazy, right? Destroy 2 cards on an Elestral. And the stats on this are killer. 6/6. That's unthinkable. Importantly, you're probably looking at the bones of this deck and thinking, wow, that's a lot of 2 mats. How are you going to consistently have guys on your field in order to ascend into these? Well, I would direct you to a video published by the Elestronauts this past week, in which Bean Soldier basically forecasts that lunar phase that lets you Nexus is going to basically enable a whole bunch of unplayable dog shit to creep its way into the metagame. Finally, you'll probably be playing format Superstar Astrabbit and side deck Superstar Spectrus in this as well. I think the deck kind of builds itself, and the end result honestly seems pretty strong. Next up is Blistrix. I do not know how this one is going to shake out. So in case you're unfamiliar, Blistrix and its pre-ascensions, Asprowl and Snowlit, all kind of deal with self-milling. Like Snowlet on cast or receive mills 3, and then Referral can subsequently be special ascended into from the underworld onto a Snowlet. Same thing with Bliz onto an Referral. And it's not too hard to self-mill. While Snowlet is fine, Moralith exists. And importantly, Moralith is already in an okay position. I mean, I understand they were trolling a little, but Swole and K-Cray brought a really competent Snowman build to some pretty impressive finishes in the webcam events. That deck's already almost there, and Frostrix puts almost always more guys in your underworld than your opponent and allows you to cycle stuff like Cryoling over and over again. The Morfrost line gets you an unbelievable amount of hand advantage, and there's a new guy that you would theoretically add for the Morfrost line instead of like a bomb that you're never going to cast. The one thing that's preventing me from going all in on this deck is it seems super expensive, like expensive in a way that no other deck is. I've played a significant amount of Snowmen and it runs out of life really quickly. Turns out that's going to be exacerbated when you're paying like 7 turn 1 for a 12/6. Thunder Nexus. So I think Thunder Nexus is going to be good in a post Moonrise environment. The capacity in which it is good and the cards that it plays, I'm not so sure about. There's a lot of really good Thunder adjacent stuff, both in existing sets and in Moonrise, but the cards I want to focus on today are Titanostrike and Magnaros. So Titanostrike is a card that I think everyone should probably be familiar with. It gets a little bit of a benefit if Thunderstorm is in your deck, and at present it's seen a little bit of success because people were tinkering with it in the release format. They just saw a new card in Shattered Stars and they were like, I want to try the new Shattered Stars card. I don't think it's good. However, that might change with the release of Hurricane. If you watched the short the other day, you probably know that I think the play patterns around Hurricane are going to move in cycles. People will set their whole hand, get Hurricaned, then afterwards they'll only set 1, become susceptible to Thunderstorm and P-Gust, and then they'll set 2, become susceptible to Gloombat, Aviolith, and sometimes you'll just take a 2-for-1 on a Hurricane. So during periods when Thunderstorm looks to be the most effective card against your opponent's play pattern, Titanostrike seems fine. Magnaros seems a lot more fine. So this card is not Aetheros. I think it should be mentioned. It foretells cards equal to the number of Thunder enchanted cards on your field. That's going to be 2 or 3, depending on when you activate it and what is already on your board. And then you are able to add a 1 in Thunder Enchanty, 1 Thunder. There's a Thunder sign in here, Invoke Rune, foretold this way to your hand. I think that means an Invoke Rune that costs 1 Thunder. If it means an Invoke Rune that has Thunder in it, boy, Thunderstorm gets a lot better, but realistically, adding Race to the top is probably good enough. Notably, the use case for this card is probably you slap down a Magnaros and you Nexus to a copy of Astrabbit a la Sparkit, which means you're going to be adding cards from your deck to your hand anyway, but it's really just good for them to not only have a Nexus, but a Nexus that could theoretically do something even in a world where you don't already have a Receive Elestral set up. I will say I'm at least a little concerned about this Thunder Lunar mismatch emboldened by Electronite. I really need this deck not to be good. And it might be. Next up is Voldusk Phases. Yo! Is really all I have to say about this deck. It seems like it only really does the one thing. The deck sort of builds itself and you need to find Voldusk or you absolutely die. But to be completely clear, that's pretty likely. I think this deck is kind of live and die off of the back of the other Lunar Elestrals synergy with other Lunar Phases. That long-ass video where Josh talks about how good Lunar Phase Full Moon is very interesting because it gives you a little bit of insight into the other cards that would have to be in what is alternatively just Sky Striker. I think the Lunar Phases are only sort of good. There's 2 or 3 I like playing and a couple that I will stomach if I have to. And I think that the playable ones synergize with a significant amount of cards. Obviously, they enable big bosses like Pharaohgeist, but also they put you in a good position for like Comalis or like Pulveror, which is not a bad position to be in at all. I hope this deck is good. This is like a capital G game plan deck, and I think it would be good for Elestrals, period, if it was playable in some capacity. And finally, Schnark. Damn, I just love Schnark. I like Schnark. Schnark is a 3/3. It has an on-cast Rhoda, but it Rhodas for like a stat line. Schnark allows you to search your deck for a card with enchantment cost Water Lunar and add it to your hand. This gets his Ascension Joblin, which is a Water and a Lunar 8/4 and can expend a Water in order to change the position of an Elestral that is not Water enchanted. And then when anyone changes positions, you can draw a card. But it can also theoretically get Tsunami High Tide, which allows you to change the position of up to 2 Elestrals as an invoke and then enchant from your underworld to your field. So there's a lot of situations where you have half of the combo, and you're able to like Schnark for the other half, get your guy out, and then afterwards draw a shitload of cards off its native effect, the effect of Tsunami High Tide, then attack for like 4 because you enchanted to it. I will admit though that is Magical Christmas Land. One other weird thing about Schnark that I think I should know that I don't know presently is like, what can he search Draking? Draking's got the same, it's water lunar, but it's lunar comma water, not water comma lunar. Does it have to be water comma lunar? If so, that's sad. I'm sorry. So those are the decks that I'm excited about. What are you looking to put together for the Moonrise season? And if you haven't already, are you interested in playing those decks during the Poison Nectar Monthly this coming Saturday? Side note, the PNM is in a really weird spot at present. If you have the opportunity, please check out my post on the community page. I really want this to be a Moonrise tournament, but doing so is harder than you would expect. That's it. See ya.